Welcome, everybody, to the Z Suite. I'm Mark Orttung, CEO of Projectworks, and today's episode is going to be fun. When I was at Nexient, it took the team and I about 5 years to get our first client over 10 million a year, and that even was not all in one deal. So when Aaron told me he had closed a $1.5 billion total value deal, it just kind of blew me away. It's a lot of zeros. So, very excited to have Aaron joining us today. Let me also introduce Bex, who's joining to moderate the conversation. And she's going to ask Aaron and I lots of difficult questions along the way and also try to keep the two of us to time. Um,
Wish me luck,
so,
team.
Best of luck. Yeah.
yes, best of luck for sure. So, Aaron and I worked together. At NTT Data after they bought Nexient. Aaron was my boss, and I learned a ton from him about all kinds of things, including how to sell giant deals. So really excited to hear more about this. Before we get into the $1.5 billion deal, though, Aaron, we thought we'd ask, what's a deal that got away? What's one that you wanted to win but didn't?
Yeah, it's funny. There's two types of deals. There's the deals you win, those are exciting, but the deals you lose leave scars for sure. Um,
Yeah.
there's so many deals from this year that we lost, right? So it's not like we had a perfect record. No one gets a perfect record. But I will say the biggest one that was a loss that you could foresee was actually from the time that you and I were working together, Mark. So like 4.5 years ago, thereabouts, right? When I'd first joined NTT, I think you guys had just gotten acquired. We had one of our largest clients who was putting out one of our contracts they were putting it out for renewal. So this was one of our largest clients, one of the biggest revenue clients. And we had hit a point in the relationship where everybody kind of wasn't in a great place with each other, right? I think you call it fatigue, is the polite way of saying it. The other way of saying is everybody hated each other. Uh, we were definitely in the we hate each other phase, and our response reflected it, right? So client was adamant they were going to go out for the services to recompete. And I remember I was asked when I first walked in the door, go review this deal, go look at this deal, and sprinkle some digital transformation magic into the deal so that we have a chance of winning. And I went and I looked at the deal and I was like, yeah, there's no way we're going to win it. Um, our response, again, keep in mind, everyone hated each other phase. Our response was, we understand you want something different. Well, it's too high risk to change anything, so we're going to give you exactly the same services that we've been selling you, but we're going to charge you more for them. Um, so it didn't take like a brain surgeon to walk in there and be like, yeah, we've lost that deal. But I will say, losing those deals are painful because we've been working for the last 2.5 years or last 4.5 years almost to recover that revenue.
Mm. Yeah, losing
Wow.
an incumbent hurts, eh?
It's painful,
But
really painful.
but also like there's moments where it just feels like the only thing that's going to happen, right? Like when it sort of becomes that toxic, it's really hard to get it out of a death spiral.
When the team, when the client, when everyone's mutually agreed to each other's destruction, yeah, you're done for, right? You've got to change something if you want to change it. And you can't expect the client to change something. So it's kind of on you as the supplier, as the partner to actually mix things up. And it's hard, right? There's a lot of egos, there's a lot of hurt feelings, there's a lot of justifications of, well, the numbers never add up. Well, someone's going to win the work. So the numbers are going to add up for somebody. Anyways, it's a whole deal.
Oh man. Awesome. Well, I want to kick off by throwing you some myths around mega projects. And when we're talking about mega projects, we're talking about Aaron's 1.5 billion. But I imagine for some of the consultants on this call, a mega project's like 100 million, 10 million, 1 million, half a million, quarter of a million. So when we talk about mega projects, whatever that means in your market kind of feels like how we want to answer it. And there's a lot of myths. And we've been talking about a lot of those over the last few days as we've been getting ready for this conversation. So, Mark, Aaron, audience, I'm going to throw you a statement, and I want to know is this true or is this false? And tell me why. The first one is smaller consulting firms can't handle big projects. True or false, guys? Audience, I'd love you to kind of throw your thoughts in the mix as well.
I'm going to go with false and squint my face while I do it so I give myself a hedge.
How about
Yeah,
you, Mark?
same here. I'm gonna go with false, but I'm really on the fence on this one.
Yeah.
So one example, when early on in Nexian, I was pitching JP Morgan Chase, which is I think the largest bank in the US. If not, it's the top two or three. And the guy said, I really like your story, but your firm's too small. And I said, well, we'll get some more people. And he's like, if we like what you're pitching, we're going to need 1,200 people on the team. And we were probably like 400 people in the whole company at this point. So I just didn't have a credible story for how we were going to get from 400 people to 1,200 people that were all qualified, work together, and like, so we just like kind of got washed out. So unless you find in a situation like that, it's really hard to do. Um,
Yeah, 100% right. And Bex, I think it's all back to your opening statement, which is it's kind of all relative to your market and the segment you're playing in. Like, so small in a large global systems integrating universe, like some of the companies we acquired were a couple thousand people. That's still relatively small-ish when you go after some really, really big opportunities. But like Mark, I think again, when you were there, we'd gone after an opportunity at Salesforce that we had landed, and it was to run, to basically be the outsourcer for Salesforce's IT department, to basically run Salesforce for Salesforce. And we took one of our acquisitions that like had never gone after a pursuit like that in their entire existence and said, "Oh no, you guys can do this, right? Like this is your sweet spot. You just don't know it." And we put the right leadership in front of them to walk them through the deal, and then they were able to do it. But it pushed them about to the edge of everything that they were comfortable with by a long
Mm.
shot, right? By a long shot.
And I imagine
yeah.
part of it's kind of knowing, is this just big enough? Is it too big? And I imagine sometimes you can kind of get in your own way a bit on that,
Yeah,
either through too much ambition or not enough.
That's also
sellers.
like,
Good, Mark.
I was gonna say, that's like the dream for an acquisition where they couldn't have done that without NTT's help or without your help, right? So that's
Was
like,
the perfect it was like the perfect poster child of what it was supposed to look like. But like Bex, to your point, it did feel a lot like the dog that had caught the ambulance. And sort of you sit there afterwards and everyone like I remember I about fell out of my chair when I heard we won. Um and and everyone had a very similar reaction. It was like, oh dear God, like we actually have to mobilize for this thing now.
Yeah. Be careful what you
And
pitch for, eh?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I think there's some similar stuff going on in the chat. Samir kind of saying like half true, like there's some truth to it, but also you can push it too far. And then David saying like false, but it can be an absolute kind of growth accelerator if you get it right. Any wisdom or advice for like finding that sweet spot so it becomes a growth accelerator rather than a firm killer or even reputation killer?
I think
Mark, I'll
it's
defer to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's going to riff off what Aaron just said. You need to be right at the edge of your comfort zone. So for example, when I was at 400 people trying to sell and they were telling me they needed 1,200, that was like three times my current, that just had no credible story. But if somebody said they needed 200 people or maybe 250, then it still would have been pretty rough to do, but I could probably pull it off. So like I think you got to find that balance between there's just no way you can possibly do it and oh yeah, this is easy, it's comfortable. Like you want to be in that kind of slightly awkward, slightly uncomfortable zone that's just beyond what you can do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
I just reiterate that, like, and maybe it's slightly nuanced, but what you just said there, your comfort zone, um, very personally for me, like I've always found all my big career progressions on a personal basis have been when I'm most uncomfortable. And I think from a corporate perspective or from a business perspective, team perspective, whatever it is, getting yourself into that, like I'm just outside my comfort zone, that is actually, I think, when teams really shine. And it's when you have the best growth moments as a company, as a team, as a individual.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. All right, next one. True or false, team? 100K projects are just like 1 billion projects. Is that one true or is that one false?
I'm gonna go false on that one. If you'd raised it up to 10 million, I might have given it to you. 100K, like your undersigning authorities, like you can sneak those past people. No one in the procurement office is going to notice a 100K
Mm.
deal getting signed, but everyone's going to notice a billion.
Yeah, I agree. False. And somewhere around 10 million, they become complicated and political and and
Great.
anything bigger than that, they're all like similar, kind of like messy, hard to deliver, hard to keep everyone happy. I guess I didn't realize this, but there's this we hate each other phase. And so you're kind of on a path to the we hate each other phase once maybe over 10 million.
Why would anyone want to do a 10 million project then? And from what I've heard behind the scenes, like the complexities are like huge.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. But I'll go back to the go right to your level of discomfort, right? Like that's the breakthrough moments for everybody,
Yeah.
typically, right? It's
Yeah.
trial by fire, but it's important.
Yeah. And I imagine there's kind of that firm growth that happens as a result, but also there's the team growth, right? Like everyone just has to step up when a
Yeah.
100 million project shows up. Uh,
Yeah, you don't have a choice, right?
yeah.
Like it's every man, woman, and child on deck to go make sure you can deliver.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
True or false? The bigger the project, the longer it takes to win. What do you think?
Again, it's all relative, but I'll go true in general.
Yeah. Mark?
I was going to say false on this one.
Really?
I think a $10 million deal and a billion and a half. You can tell me if I'm wrong because I've never sold a billion and a half, but I think they both take 18 months. Like I don't know, maybe a billion and a half takes 5 years, and I don't appreciate that. But I think like somewhere over 10 million is just big and complicated and messy, but no company has an attention span of more than 18 months.
I agree with
Like
that. No
uh,
corporation, no company, no private equity firm, no venture cap. Like no one has patience for more than 18 months of anything typically, right?
yeah.
I will say the asterisk on the 1.5 billion is in the public sector domain. Public sector domain pursuits do take longer, typically, just by virtue of public sector procurement laws, and that's true again, regardless of what country or geography, but certainly in the U.S. Um, Having said that, the motions are all the same, right? Like all the work you do ahead of deals and during the deal, it's all very much the same. You just have to stick within a particular set of guidelines and rules and make sure you don't accidentally cross over those. But the $1.5 billion deal, I can tell you that our main seller that had identified and worked this opportunity was working it easily 4 years before the deal came out
Wow.
to start to wrangle like the stakeholders and the who's who in the zoo and what's really going on. And there's a lot of work because it's the complexities. It's a multiple, right? It's orders of
Yeah.
magnitude.
Yeah, so there's the
Wow.
kind of the official timeline, and then there's the
Oh yeah,
unofficial timeline, and that's the stuff that
yeah,
happens behind the scenes. Yeah, nice.
yeah.
Awesome. True or false? It's possible to grow a consulting firm without winning big chunky projects.
I'd go true, but Mark, you've got maybe more salient experience here.
Um, I'm on the fence on this one. I'm gonna go false because I think to really get to critical mass and scale, you need mega projects. It just becomes like we were doing a lot of 100, 200, 500K projects and just kind of stuck at a wall of about between 30 and 40 million US. And the way we broke it was getting a few clients to go over 10 million each. And the having like three $10 million clients is so much easier than having like 40 clients that are all under a million.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And so that allowed us to scale. So I'm kind of twisting the question a little bit. You can grow, but you can't really get to scale
Yeah.
without
But
making
but
it.
just to test you on that, like that was focus on a subset of clients, right? You didn't have like a couple 10 million projects. Did you have a couple 10 million projects, or did you have
No,
like
I think our biggest
10
project
million?
ever was like 2 or 3 million, but we
Right. So
had,
you
yeah,
had
we built
penetration.
a portfolio.
Yeah, yeah. It's a portfolio approach. So I agree with that, right? Getting that portfolio approach at a few accounts where you can actually create focus for your team and your company, I think makes a huge difference, right? And cutting off the tail because you otherwise you get distracted. You get the tyranny of the small, right? Like you just get all these little things that are ridiculously distracting and doesn't actually let you get the growth you want. And again, I think
Yeah.
that's true regardless of the size of the company.
Yeah. I love that
Yep.
cutting off the tail.
Cutting
All
off
right,
the
last
tail.
one team before we jump into postmortem mode. True or false? No firm has a 100% win rate. It's just not possible.
I would say that's true.
I would
No,
say
for
it's true.
I can't imagine. I'm trying to think. who
I'd be
might.
happy to have a 50 or 60% win rate of things that we truly were proposing. Like, can't
Yeah,
imagine.
Yeah.
I think industry average is like 30%, assuming you're pursuing stuff that's new, right? Somewhere like a third is what you would hope for.
Yeah.
And again, I'm talking industry average from big global systems integrator perspectives. But I
Hmm.
think that holds true even in the smaller firms, that you can roughly expect to win a third of the time. But again, there's a big asterisk there, right? Like you still have to do all kind of the right things. It's not like they're like if you're doing nothing but responding to cold RFPs, like it's like the guy that or the gal that gets invited to the poker match. Like you wonder why you've been invited. You're not there to win, right? You're there to hand over your money. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, I'd say false. Like I can't imagine anyone's winning 100% of the time. It's like baseball, which
Yeah.
might be not be an appropriate analogy for this international audience, but
No, we're seeing some similar kind of stuff happening in the chat as well. I think that one is definitely a we're all in agreement that 100% win is not the target.
yeah.
Um, but speaking of wins, let's switch to postmortem mode. Mark, I'm going to
Hmm.
throw it to you. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, me too. So, yeah, so Aaron and I are going to dig into a postmortem on this $1.5 billion project. I don't know, Aaron, how you want to describe it. I know it was sort of a public recorded audience here, so I don't know if you're like what's shareable or not. So maybe we start with a little context, and then I got lots of questions.
Yeah, so I'm like 99.9% certain this is all in the public domain, so I think it's safe to share. But we won a contract whose lifetime value is worth $1.5 billion. That includes optional years as well as base years in a contract. So I don't want to pretend like it's $1.5 billion over the base contract and there's more to be had, right? But it's the full amount of the contract, and it's deliver services to the state of Texas, which again was for us was an account that we wanted to specifically target and go after for a variety of reasons. One, it's like if you look in the economies of the world, I think Texas is like the eighth or ninth largest economy if you made it a country, right? It's like their economy is larger than Canada, larger than Italy, larger than Russia, and I don't want to risk irritating Putin. Um, but like so, but it's a huge economy, right? So it's a big addressable market. Um, One, two, right? We as a company are for North America are headquartered in Texas, and so there's a little element of a matter of pride of just winning that business. But yeah, important for, and then the work was, at the type of work we want to be doing in the market. So a lot of public cloud and cybersecurity related services for the state, um, with a huge amount of both growth potential, but also again referenceability when we go to any other clients, right? Where it's like if we can do it for the state of Texas, ninth largest economy, eighth largest economy in the world, we can probably do it for you. What's your question, right? Sort of conversation. So that's the context. Um, but yeah, it's a hugely complicated pursuit, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned pre-work was 4 years plus, at least for the person who was the main seller. So what kind of groundwork did they do before even the official kind of procurement began?
Yeah, so I think the majority of the groundwork in those type of situations, and again, I don't think it matters whether it's commercial or public sector, is you start by figuring out who are the various stakeholders, the various decision makers, the influencers, but like what's the actual map of people that are somehow involved in some shape or form in the decision making processes or the experience of how this is going to get sold and delivered to. And then you do the rounds, right? Like you do the rounds of the deep listening rounds of what are the actual pain points, what keeps people up at night, um, where are there opportunities to really deliver an outstanding experience. The list goes on, but really you're just trying to get to the what's the problem, what's the opportunity, what's the problem, what's the opportunity over and over and over again across many different stakeholders, and you're going to get very different opinions, right? And throughout the course of that, right, you are trying to um, play back what you're hearing, right? And you're doing it on a repeated basis so that you're starting to show up with points of views and storytelling narratives that articulate how you could potentially um, get them to a different place. And I say get them to a different place. I'm very intentionally saying you don't go in and talk about technology and solutions like you do some of that to credentialize yourselves, but really it's the vision that you're trying to paint in terms of how it could be such aligned with what they wish they had. Because they want to buy something, something's percolating. Now, you don't know exactly what it looks like, but there's many stakeholders that have lots of opinions about what should happen. And what you want to do is weave all that together and start to um, paint that vision that they can all see themselves of like, oh, I can experience something totally different. And then ideally paint yourselves into that story a little bit. Again, like we're a Texas headquartered company and look at us. We look at bluebonnets on the weekends, just like you do in the springtime. And right, we participate in our local communities and we, shop in your shopping centers and at your grocery stores. And you probably see us on the at the little league games, and we're integral to your community, and we can be part of this. And here's who we are as a company, and here's what we do. And again, you're starting to understand that landscape of context, really the whys behind the whys behind the whys, like and just really piecing it all together. In the case of Texas, and I know I'm going a little long-winded here, Mark, but in the case of Texas,
Right.
we had everyone from clients that had a really negative perception of us, um, to clients that really only cared about the politics of who they selected. They didn't care who they selected. They cared about the visuals of like, well, who's the company who are these people that we selected, um, and and coming up with those narratives that answer all of that is the trick.
Yeah, in a corporate context, I always feel like for a deal this big, somebody inside the company puts their career at risk. To like if they make a selection of this magnitude and it goes poorly, that's the end of them. I don't know if that's true in government as much as it is in private sector, but it was yeah. So if it was that, do they have that same thing where like nobody is
Um,
incented to like really take a risk and so you have to be the safe choice, or were they willing to get out on a limb a little bit?
yeah, no, so I think that mantra is generally true. To your point, it's probably less true in public sector in terms of you're going to be fired if you don't, like you and I, when we grew up and doing this business, it was no one gets fired for hiring IBM was the saying, right? Back
Yeah.
in the 90s, right? Like that was the saying. Today, the equivalent saying is probably no one gets fired for hiring Accenture. It's probably the equivalent saying around most places around the world. NTT Data, at least in North America, our brand is sometimes known, sometimes not known. It depends, right? So we don't have the instant brand recognition of like, oh, there's an umbrella of risk remediation by picking this brand, right? So, which by the way is going to be true with like a Nexian or with other company, right? So there has to be something more, right? To your point, I think um, it's the statement of it's not personal, it's business. You flip it around in this case, right? Like it's not business, it is personal, and
Mm.
you've got to make it deeply personal, and where you have many small gestures, many large gestures, but you're building loyalty, you're building bridges on a regular basis with the various stakeholders. There has to be something more than just, hey, there's a good solution with good commercials and good pricing. And yeah, these guys seem to know what they're talking about. There has to be some real like emotional reason why a client buys from you is my belief. And then they justify it with all the other stuff, right? Like once they're bought into you as a person or you as a team of people, then the math suddenly maths in all the right ways, right? And you get like
Yep.
you get all the justifications to go happen of like, oh, this is why we're picking these guys and gals, right? Because X, Y, Z. But at the end of the day, if they don't like you, they're not going to buy from you.
Yeah, interesting. What were the odds, or how confident were you when you started the formal procurement? Do you guys think you were going to
So
win, or
so I had to go to our CEO at the time and convince him um, over the decision making that was happening. So the business unit leader, the president of our state and local business, was adamant that we should not go after this deal, because he felt that we didn't have a prayer of winning it because we did have an outspoken influencer in the state that absolutely positively did not like our team. Just
Hmm.
it's going to go out of their way to torpedo us, was the hypothesis. Um, and that person had met with this client and had been unable to kind of move the relationship. Now, I had at the same time been meeting with the client at the request of the seller as an outside executive that wasn't part of like whatever reason they had a beef with us. And so I had gotten a chance to meet with that client that was an influencer, wasn't a decision maker, but was a client. And I had a pretty frank conversation with her. I said, look, I'm just trying to get you to neutral, ideally to positive, but I want to understand like what are the reasons why you wouldn't want to work with us and how do I fix it? And so that was again, that was sort of in the pre stages of all this stuff. But right up to when the RFP was dropping, like we had heavy debates of should we go after? But at the end of the day, it was services in our wheelhouse. I had met, and not just me, but lots of team members had met with many different stakeholders over the course of the previous years. We understood their pain points. We had a narrative. We knew how to create an emotional journey that would address a lot of what they were worried about. So like for us, it was like, yeah, this is winnable if we can overcome a couple of these like negative perceptions around us and get it to positive. But it was touch and go in the beginning. I didn't make a lot of friends. I went to the CEO. I was like, can you override the person who actually owns the P&L? Because I know we can win this, which is never fun, right?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm curious, like how much of a bet, like what is the bet you put down? So I assume to do all the work you did and write the proposal and create the narrative and spend all the time, there's a fair bit of both hard dollar expense and lots of hours. Do you have like a ballpark of what it cost just to be able to submit the proposal? Like just I'm kind of curious. To win 1.5 billion, what do you have to put down on the table in terms of
Um, yeah, it's a really, really good question. I I think a good rule of thumb to use is about 1 to 2% of the pursuit value is what you spend in pursuit development costs, right? So, you know, now having said that, I'll put
it's
an
like 15 to 30 million? Is that
well, so I was going to put an asterisk here because again, I would say
okay?
it's probably closer aligned with the values that we would have recognized after our CFO got through all of her risk assessments and brought the number down in terms of what we'd actually book. So it wasn't 15 to 30 million, but you are talking about in the case of deals this size, like you're making $1 million plus bet for sure in the pursuit costs. And then to your point, an opportunity cost, right? Because it's not so much even the fact that yeah, like you've got SG&A costs, you've got sales teams, you got proposal teams, you got practitioners that have to step away from delivering actually paid engagements and show up and talk to a client about how you would do infrastructure as code and what best practices are and all the stuff practitioners show up with. Like all those conversations are opportunity costs. Um, and it just
Yeah.
means you're not going to have someone else. So like the key on every pursuit, again, whether it's 1.5 billion, whether it's Bax, what'd you say, 100K, whether it's 10 million, right? Like it's do you have good qualification
Mm,
processes and approaches to really make sure you're spending your money and time wisely? So I would say if you're spending 1 to 2% in business development, pursuit costs, and your win rate's around 33%, 30%, right? Like now you're kind of in the ballpark of industry average.
mm.
Um, it's kind
Aaron,
of like,
there's a great
yeah.
question here from Samir actually around that because I imagine some of it is kind of weighing the positive and negatives, right? And are there particular kind of positives you're looking for in terms of qualification? Are there particular negatives where you're like, if this is sitting here, we're just going to back away from it and not even bother investing in trying to win this thing? What's your sort of
Um,
checklist in your head you're running?
Yeah, I mean, so I will tell you like my personal checklist and ideally everyone in the team is doing the same checklist. But it starts with are there legitimate relationships? Have you met with the client well in advance of the RFP dropping? Do you really know what the why is? Like, do you really understand what they need to go solve for? And not just, and again, in deals that are this large, the number of stakeholders you have are in the 30s, 40s. It's not one or two decision makers. So you have to actually understand a very complex mapping. Um, and you have to understand the people that are influencing those people and start to really figure out like, all right, who's got the different conversations happening, who's got the different biases. So really making sure that the team understands that. In this case, I happen to have participated with the seller, so I had good firsthand experience, so I was really confident. But when cases where like you're evaluating deals where, you have an person involved, you got to make sure you're interrogating and making sure like, okay, this is not, I attended a conference where the person was on stage and I watched them speak. Like, yeah, okay, that doesn't count, guys. Like that's not actually meeting the client ahead of time and doing what, the classic, are you shaping the deal? Um, but to me, that's the single most important thing. I think in the commercial space, there's other things to pay attention to, maybe different than public sector. Like, when you look at the leadership team that's making the decisions, like, do they have bias towards some of the competitors? Do they have the reason to leave those competitors or to create an alternate vendor that might be stood up against the, in a primary, secondary kind of motion? Is there a burning need in the business? Is there like, so there's a lot of other questions you go through to qualify. Um, but the number one thing for me is relationship. Because if you don't have the relationship, you can't overcome the rest of all the other objections you're going to go get.
Yeah. And has that stayed the same for you, kind of regardless of deal size all the way through?
Yes, 100%. Right. I can tell you, and again, I gave my example, the deal we lost at the beginning, right? Like that was a bad relationship. Now, arguably, you can't fix it by following the same path. Like you had to change the relationship to go ahead and get to a different answer. I've had deals that like we thought we won. We went and celebrated a win prematurely, and then found out we lost because we didn't actually have the relationships that we thought we had. And a competitor that did have the relationships did an end run and just took the deal away from us. So relationships matter um, more than almost anything else.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mark, I reckon we've got time for one more question. We could go forever on this one, but I reckon, yeah, one more question.
Yeah, yeah. So I know the other thing we had talked about is you have increased your $100 million deals this year as well by an eye-popping percentage. I think it was 500% or something crazy like that. Um,
It's 500. Since I'll give you a fun, I don't want to reveal too much insider baseball, but yeah, it's a 550% increase from the 12 months prior to us standing up a large deal team. So we very intentionally set up a team to go after large pursuits. And if we look before that team's existence to after that team's existence, it's a 550% increase.
That's amazing. First, that's just incredible. So, what's the difference between those and the billion and a half? Do they feel different, like 100 million versus a billion and a half, or does it feel pretty much
Um, they actually
same
feel
flavor?
remarkably similar, right? All these deals have, and again, that was back to your question, the true false when you said the 100K. But like, again, when you start looking at deals, I'd say greater than 10, $20 million and up, they start to develop pretty similar characteristics in terms of complexity of buying, behaviors, the number of stakeholders involved. Honestly, selling internally is sometimes harder than selling externally, right? So you actually have to figure out how to convince all the people that are worried about risk, and deliverability and all the fun stuff that the salespeople are trying to convince, like, yeah, no, this is all doable. They're all trying to figure out all the ways that it typically can't be doable. Um, right. So you have to navigate all that stuff. In large corporations, particularly when you do get certain dollar thresholds, you have to go through different thresholds of approvals, again, internally. So that can add complexity, right? It's a question of whether you can get regional approval or global approval, or even go up to in our case at NTT Data, go all the way up to the mothership in Japan and get board level approval if you have a deal of a certain size. But it's right, like it's they're kind of all the same. Um, I would say, right? And maybe that's doing it a disservice, but I'm trying to think if there's any material differences. I don't think the sales motions and how you win the deals vary materially at 100 million versus order of magnitude higher.
Mm.
Yeah. I've never sold either, but that makes sense, like intuitively. That's awesome. Uh, so yeah, it sounds like we should probably move towards sort of wrapping up. I think for me, my biggest takeaways, well, it sounds like it's relationship, relationship, relationship to get these kinds of deals done. There's a lot of mechanics, a lot of other things that have to be good, but if the relationship's not there, it's not going to go forward. Aaron, what do you walk away with?
I'll give an asterisk to what you just said because I think that's true as long as you're not like an Accenture or let's say a globally branded safe pair of hands that people just say, again, I won't get fired if I hire these people.
Mm.
Um, there's an old joke that actually a Deloitte partner shared with me, which was, a Deloitte partner and an Accenture partner are both called by a client, same client, about a potential opportunity. And the client says, I've got a board presentation on Tuesday. This is on a Friday. I've got a board presentation on Tuesday. I need your help. Accenture says, got it right away. I'm going to run off and go assemble the smartest people on the planet that know this space. And we're going to spend all weekend working on your board presentation. And we'll show up on Monday and walk you through it. And the Deloitte partner's response is, "That's great. Why don't we meet for breakfast tomorrow morning and talk about what it should look like?" Um, and those two different styles, um, by the way, probably reflect the personality of those two firms. And hopefully, I'm not defaming anyone publicly by saying this, but it probably reflects their personalities. And the reality is, somewhere in the middle of that is actually the sweet spot of what you want to go do with clients. But it does, like, if you don't have the relationship and you don't have the brand, I will tell you, you can show up with a great solution, great proposal, great commercials, great pricing, everything, but it's just not sufficient usually for a client to go bet their career on you, certainly for a larger deal.
It's great advice. So I don't think we've got many Accentures in the audience today, in our live audience, but I imagine we've got a lot of ambitious founders, CEOs of consulting firms. What's the one nugget of advice you'd have for them as they kind of like wrap up 2025 and head into 2026, wanting to win a bigger project, whatever number that is for them?
My one piece of advice is confidence is contagious, right? So losing is also contagious. If you have to pick one of those two things, I'd pick the confidence side, and just, be strong with your confidence, both internally and externally.
Yeah, and for me, I think I'd say from the Nexian days, it took time to build. So we always had to convince them we were special. Then we'd do a pilot that was usually something that someone else had failed at, and we'd have to succeed at it before they'd let us in the door. And then you'd have to do two or three medium projects well before they'd even think about giving you a big project. So think about it as a long-term game. It is a long game if you're a boutique and you don't have that global safe hands kind of a reputation, but it's doable and just play the long game. Do we want to try to hit any of the audience questions? I know there's a few things in there. Maybe take a minute or two.
I think we've
Or
got most of them. There were some good
oh,
ones.
have we?
Yeah, kind of like listening along. I think you guys have answered some of them without even meaning to.
Okay,
Just good.
perfect. All right. Well, why don't we wrap up then? Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining, and Bex for moderating. Great session. We will see you. This is the last episode of this year. We'll see you in 2026 for the next season of the Z Suite. So until then, keep zigging and zagging. Thanks, everybody.